Hi everyone, welcome back to the Mild Feminist channel. I'm Paige and I'm so glad you're here and thank you again for joining me. Today is my first video on my series that I'm calling Adult Sex Ed, and I'm super excited to be talking about all of this fun sex type stuff, but today I'm going to be covering anatomy. But if you haven't checked out my intro to this series, please go check it out. It has some really important disclaimers in it and talking about the language that I'm going to be using so that you can understand what I'm talking about when I use certain words and pronouns and things like that. So please go check that out. It's going to be really beneficial for you in all these videos, so it's going to be important that you know what I'm talking about. So please go check out the intro video and then come on back and we'll be talking about anatomy when you come back. I especially strongly recommend watching that intro video if you are LGBTQ+. Simply because I use some certain terminology and pronouns to identify certain groups of people, and some of these videos maybe won't really jive with you as much depending on how you identify. And like if you're trans, I'm not going to be covering trans anatomy in this video just because I don't feel like I'm educated enough to be able to go over that. So please go check out that video, my intro video, and it will give you all the stuff that you need. And I will have some links hopefully down below in the description. So please go check that out and I will see you soon. We'll be going over really brief disclaimers really quick, actually right now. Also, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel as well as hit that bell icon just so that you're notified when any of these new sex ed videos gets dropped. And if you could also please share this video. I feel like this is a topic and this whole series could be something that so many people, your mom, your dad, your sister, your friend, whatever, could all benefit from. So please share this video with everyone you know, and then tell them to hit their bell icon because that would really mean a lot to me. Thank you so much. Okay, so now that all that's out of the way, let's get into the first video of this series, which, as I said before, is anatomy. I'm going to be going over anatomy of menstruators and anatomy of people with penises. And I'm super excited to talk about this because generally everybody has this type of anatomy, or some sort of variation of it. And I feel like a lot of people were given not great information about what their body actually has down there. So I'm excited to be going over this, and this is going to set the ground floor for this entire series. So I'm excited, and let's get into it. As I mentioned before, I'm not going to be going over trans anatomy in this video just because I don't feel like I'm educated enough on that subject to be able to give good information on that. So please check out the description below. I'm going to have some links to some other YouTubers that are trans and talk about their transition or their hormone therapy, all that stuff. So please check that out, and I hope you find that to be beneficial. Okay, so here we go. We're going to be talking about the anatomy of menstruators first. And we're going to be doing the internal anatomy first. So uterus, ovaries, all that jazz. Okay, and first up, we are going to start with the ovaries. The ovaries are actually two almond-ish sized organs that hang out on the side of the uterus. And they actually hold all of your eggs, and all your eggs just kind of hang out together in your ovaries, but each egg is also surrounded by a group of cells called follicles, and those follicles actually help to grow your egg around the time of ovulation. And we are going to be talking about ovulation in my later video, in a couple of later videos actually. So stay tuned for more on ovulation, but just know that your ovaries hold your eggs, and each egg has groups of cells that are called follicles. One-ish egg is released at the time of ovulation. Sometimes more eggs, like 2, are released, or 1 from each side is released, but generally it's one side. If you have more than 1, like from each side or 1 from each side, then that could potentially lead to like fraternal twins or something like that. So that does sometimes happen, but generally just 1 egg is released from one side at a time, and usually they alternate sides from when they ovulate. They do one side and then the other the next month. So that's generally how that works, but just know that sometimes you can ovulate on both sides at one time, but that doesn't usually happen. So ovaries are also in charge of producing estrogen and progesterone, which is what helps your body when it's pregnant or ovulating or, you know, whatever. Those are generally the hormones that are prominent in the body of a menstruator. And the ovaries are responsible for taking care of all of that, which is why if you have a full hysterectomy and they take out your ovaries, that's when menopause kind of sets in. It's because your ovaries are now gone and they can't produce the correct amount of hormones and all that stuff. Fun fact though, you are actually born, or menstruators are actually born with all their eggs already inside of them. So you don't grow eggs, you don't grow new eggs, I should say. You already have all the eggs that you're ever gonna have. So if you think about it, when like your birth parent was born, they already had all the eggs and they had you already inside of them. It was already formed and all that stuff. It was just waiting for a little spermie to come and make it into you. So next up we have what's called the FIMBRIAE. And those are like finger-like little things that actually kind of surround the ovary that help to sweep the egg into the fallopian tube. And sometimes an egg actually doesn't get caught by those little like things, the FIMBRIAE. Sometimes the eggs don't get caught by that and they just kind of float away, and that's okay. Your body will just absorb the cells and it's no big deal. But that's what those little like hand looking things that go around the ovary are, is they actually help to make sure that the egg actually makes it into the fallopian tube. Next we have the fallopian tubes. So the fallopian tubes are those longish looking tubes that go from the FIMBRIAE all the way to the actual uterus. And that's where the egg kind of travels. And most of the time, if the egg were to become fertilized, meaning a possible pregnancy, that's usually where it happens, is the sperm usually ends up meeting the egg in the fallopian tube, and then it fertilizes it and it kind of travels down into the uterus and then possibly attaches to the uterine wall. Sometimes a fertilized egg will attach to the fallopian tube, and that's what's called an ectopic pregnancy, which can be actually deadly. Those are very, very serious conditions, and they're very painful and sometimes results in, rare cases, death, but then sometimes also can even result in losing your fallopian tube, which we will talk about what that looks like in a later video. Another fun fact, the fallopian tubes are generally like 4 to 5 inches long, which I thought was kind of long. That seemed long to me. I thought they were going to be a lot shorter, but 4 to 5 inches long is generally what your fallopian tubes are. Okay, next up, we have the big one, the uterus. The uterus is a hollow pear-shaped organ that's about the size of like a lemon. And the uterus is actually responsible for a lot of things, but the main thing that most people associate it with is it's the organ that incubates a fetus or a baby, whatever you prefer. I'm a doula, so I'm just used to calling it a baby. So that's probably what I'm going to be referring to it as is a baby, just because that's what I'm used to. But know that it could be called a fetus. It's just kind of whatever you prefer. But Anyways, the uterus is responsible for incubating the baby. As I said before, the uterus is responsible for a lot of things. It's not just responsible for incubating a baby, it's also responsible for our monthly menstrual cycles. The uterus grows a rich lining, blood-rich lining on the inside, which is actually called the endometrium. And that's where, if a fertilized egg is going to implant, it's going to implant onto that endometrium. And if an egg doesn't implant onto the endometrium, then that's what actually is shed during your menstrual cycle. So all that endometrium is like, oh no, there's no baby in here. Let's just evacuate. And then all that tissue comes out in the form of a menstrual cycle or a period. Not so fun fact. The endometrium is kind of what's responsible for anyone who has the condition that's called endometriosis. Endometriosis is actually when your endometrium doesn't grow only on the inside of your uterus. It can actually grow outside of the uterus, on the uterus, or even, shockingly, completely different organs of the body. It can grow on your liver and all the way up into like your chest organs, which is rare but happens. So if you think about it, at your monthly period, if you have endometriosis, all of that endometrium is trying to shed, and it's inside your body but not able to come out. So that's where a lot of that really super bad pain comes from. So if there's anyone out there with endometriosis, I am so sorry. That is really awful and really hard, and I hope that you find everything that you need, any medications or therapy or whatever, because endometriosis is not something to mess around with. So if you know anyone with endometriosis, give them a hug. They might need it. They're going through a lot. So moving on, next up we have the cervix. The cervix is actually the lowest part of the uterus, so it is considered part of the uterus, but it has a lot of important jobs. The cervix actually produces a fluid or mucus. It's called cervical fluid or cervical mucus, whatever sounds less gross to you. To me, I like to call it fluid because the word mucus is bleh, gross. So it produces cervical fluid that actually helps to carry the sperm through the cervix and into the uterus. And the job of that is to then hopefully end up fertilizing an egg, though if you don't want a pregnancy, then hopefully that doesn't happen, but that's what that cervical fluid is for. The cervix does actually have a really, really teeny tiny little hole in it. An opening, I should say. It has an opening that enters into the uterus, and that's actually what dilates when you're having a baby. So it goes from super small all the way to like the size of like a bagel, which is obviously, like, not obviously, but roughly 10 centimeters. If you've had a baby, then you know what that means. But your cervix hole opening ends up stretching out, and it becomes about the size of 10 centimeters, and then that's when the baby would pass through the cervix and into the vaginal canal. Which actually brings us to our next topic, the vagina, or the vaginal canal, which is that area between the vaginal opening and the cervix. And that's where the penis, or whatever you enjoy having sex with, would be hanging out during intimacy. It's the vagina or the vaginal canal, but that's also where the baby would pass through in its process to being born. Okay, so that was a lot, and that was all the internal anatomy. There's more, there's like ligaments and things like that, but that's not really pertaining to sex ed, so we're not really going to go into that. We may in later videos, but for now, we're going to move on to the external genitals. First up, we have the vaginal opening, which I just mentioned. The vaginal canal comes to the opening of the vagina, which is the vaginal opening. Shocking, right? And this is where, like, the penis would enter, or, you know, if you're having sex with, or you're using a different object or whatever, that's where that would possibly go into. And it's also, again, where the baby would actually come out and be born if you're having a vaginal birth. There's more than one way to birth a baby, and it's not just vaginally. Okay, moving on to kind of a sensitive subject, because we are going to be talking about the hymen, which the hymen is, I'm sorry, but it's just not an indication of virginity. And if you believe it to be so, then get educated, please, because that is just not the case. There is no sign of virginity and having a hymen being linked. I mean, for some people, I suppose, sure, but the hymen is actually just like a group of like membranes that just kind of hangs out at the opening of the vagina. But let me just say, there's always like, or generally always, there's like a hole in it, which is how you like would still menstruate or put a tampon in and all that stuff. But the other thing is that it can easily be washed away through things like sports and just day-to-day activity, or even just washing down there. Like, some people just don't have it. And if someone is using that as like, oh, you're not a virgin because you don't have your hymen, I didn't pop your cherry, that's just horse. It's a downright joke. There is no way to tell for sure that someone is a virgin or not, and honestly, it shouldn't freaking matter, okay? But for anyone who is a virgin out there, know that sex may not be painful. Maybe. It just kind of depends on how comfortable and safe you feel in the situation. If you're feeling uncomfortable and like this isn't okay, then it's probably not going to feel good, and you may have some not so good feeling with having your first sexual experience, and that goes into sexual trauma as well. If you can, please, make sure that you're feeling comfortable with the situation before choosing to have sex with someone. And know that there may not be any blood involved either. It just kind of depends if the hymen is intact or if it's washed away or whatever. That may just not be something that happens, and don't be concerned if you don't end up bleeding. And if you do, that sometimes happens, and that's okay too. Okay, now we're moving a little bit more outward. Now that all of that's out of the way. We're going to be talking about more of the vulva. That's what it's called. The external genitals of a menstruator is called the vulva. And we're going to be talking about the inner vaginal lips. We're not really going to be talking about the outer vaginal lips, just know that the outer vaginal lips grows hair, and it kind of covers and protects the vagina a little bit. But the inner vaginal lips is what we're going to be talking about next. The inner vaginal lips are also known as the inner labia or the labia minora. The labias sometimes cover the vaginal opening, though sometimes they don't. Sometimes they hang out a little bit more. And that's just kind of depending on your vagina. Both are normal. All vaginas are normal. Nothing's odd or weird. Everyone who has a vagina has a beautiful one. But anyways, when sexually aroused, the labias actually fill with blood, and they kind of open up a little bit to allow some space for things to enter. Okay, next we have the urethra. A lot of people are actually under the assumption that there's only one hole down there, and that you have sex and urinate in the same hole, and that is just not the case. Yowza, that is not the case. You actually have a whole separate hole that you urinate through, and it is right there. And the urethra is solely independent from the vaginal opening, and its only job is to urinate. And that's it. So now onto the fun part of our sex ed anatomy video, the clitoris. For a lot of menstruators, the clitoris is where the magic kind of happens sexually. There's lots of different erogenous zones, which we're going to talk about, but the clitoris is a huge, huge one. It's the most sexually sensitive area of the body. It has the most nerve endings in it, sexual nerve endings, than like any other part of the body. Most of the time you may not even really see the clitoris because it's got this nice little fold of skin called the clitoral hood that kind of covers it and protects it because it's insanely sensitive, and if you didn't have that, it would maybe not be so fun. So that's what that little flap of skin is for, but you can actually pull it up and you can check out what your clitoris actually looks like if you'd like. All right, and last but not least, we have the perineum. So the perineum is actually that tissue between the anus and the vaginal opening. Yes, it has an actual name other than taint, because that's a gross word. It's called the perineum. And it stretches and relaxes when having a baby, when having sex, all that stuff. It doesn't really serve much of a purpose sexually, but just know that that area actually has a real name. All right, we are halfway there. We have a whole nother group of people to talk about as far as anatomy goes, and that is anyone with a penis, anyone born with a penis. So let's actually flip some things around, and we're going to talk about the external anatomy first. First up, we have the penis, and there it is. It's just in your face. It's a penis. You can't miss it. No, but in all seriousness, the penis has a lot of functions. It does a lot of things. It's kind of a universal organ, which is pretty neat in my opinion. The main thing is that it emits sperm during like an ejaculation or an orgasm, if that's what you want to call it, but ejaculation is the technical term for it. But that's where like semen, and semen is basically just sperm mixed with some things, with which we'll talk about. But during an ejaculation, sperm comes out the penis, but it also is responsible for emitting urine. And contrary to what menstruators' bodies do, the same hole is responsible for ejaculation as well as urinating. Generally, though, a person with a penis can't ejaculate and urinate at the same time, so don't worry, they're not going to pee inside of you or on you or whatever. That's just probably not going to happen. We'll talk about kind of how that works in a later video. But how an erection kind of works is it fills with blood when you're feeling aroused, and then the penis would become erect. Similar to like a menstruator with their labias and their clitoris, that those areas fill with blood and then they become hypersensitive and more erect. So actually, fun fact, the tip of the penis is actually made up of the same cells that the clitoris is made up of. So in someone with a penis, the end of the penis typically is way more sensitive. It has more sexual nerve endings in it, especially for someone who is not circumcised. When that skin covers the end of the penis, it protects it from any sort of outside, touching and sensitivities. So it stays more sensitive sexually. And then when stimulating the end of the penis, people who were uncircumcised reported more sexual gratification. So if you are not circumcised, lucky you, right? Okay, let's talk about the testicles next. The testicles are technically like an internal organ, but since you kind of see them outside of the body, I'm going to talk about them now. But the testes are actually responsible for creating, making, and sending along sperm. Additionally, the testicles or testes are also responsible for producing testosterone, which we'll talk about all that in a later video. And they also make about 2 million sperm a day, which is mind-blowing. So yes, the testes are where the sperm is made. So it's a very important sex organ, so stop kicking each other in the balls because you need those. And fun fact, the left testicle typically hangs lower than the right, which I thought was interesting. But that actually brings us to our next point, the scrotum. The scrotum is actually the skin that holds the testicles. And the scrotum is also responsible for temperature regulation. Sperm is incredibly sensitive to temperatures and doesn't survive hot or cold temperatures. It needs to be very specific. So when the body is like really hot, the testicles or the scrotum may hang lower away from the body. And then when cold, they may like shrink up a little bit and go inside the body a little bit to warm up, which I thought was really interesting. It's crazy that there's just like the skin that just like knows what to do when it's hot or cold. Okay, so now we're moving on to the internal anatomy of people with a penis. There is a lot of organs and a lot of tubes and a lot of areas that go into this anatomy, so bear with me and try to keep up. Okay, first we have the epididymis. The epididymis is actually like a tube type area that is attached to the testicles, and once the sperm leave the testicles, they go into the epididymis, and that's where they grow and learn how to swim and form their fertility aspects, or like fertilization capabilities, I guess. It's super long. It's a shocking like 20 feet long, this little tube. And it takes anywhere from 2 to 12 days for sperm to get through the epididymis. And from the epididymis, the sperm actually then go to the vas deferens. And the vas deferens is another tube that actually carries the mature sperm to the seminal vesicles, which is our next topic. The seminal vesicles are little sacs that actually produce a substance that helps to keep the sperm alive. So the sperm then kind of live in this like liquidy type consistency stuff that the seminal vesicles create. Additionally, we have the prostate gland. So the prostate actually helps to keep the sperm alive as well. It produces another sort of liquid substance that the sperm can then live in. And the prostate gland is actually like the size of a walnut, and it surrounds, like it covers up, and like the urethra and the vas deferens actually go through the prostate. We've got to drink to get through this, right? This is a lot of anatomy. There's also yet another tiny gland that produces more fluid for the sperm to live in. So basically, the sperm live in lots of fluid created from lots of glands that then make up semen. Basically, anyone with a penis is just made with lots of tubes and glands to help their sperm survive, which is important for procreating. So with that, in case I lost you along the way, I'll kind of give you a breakdown of what semen is made up of. So we have 65% of the fluid comes from the seminal vesicles, and then 30% comes from the prostate gland, and then 5% of semen is actually just sperm. So it's mostly fluid. But remember, I said that like 2 million sperm is made in a day. So there's an insane amount of sperm in a single ejaculation or orgasm. Holy moly, that was a lot of vaginas and penises. I need a drink. Now that I've gone through all that, that was a lot. I hope you enjoyed it though. I think that that's all the anatomy that I have to share with you. Like I said, there's lots of other things I didn't go over, like the bladder in a person with a penis and things like that. But generally, that's like where all the sex organs are and how they work and what they do. But for now, I think that's all I have. Whew! I hope you stayed with me. That was a lot. If you enjoyed this video though, please, please, please share it with like everyone you know, because I feel like this information is really important and a lot of people are lacking this information. So please share this video and all my other videos past this point or even before, because I have good ones before this too. So please check those out if you want some good information on menstrual cups. check it out. I would like to point out that most of my information for this video came from this handy dandy little book. I say little because it's not little. It's a massive book. But you guys, this is my like fertility Bible. I learned so much from this book. It is absolutely insane. So if you're wanting to learn about your body and how it operates, please, please, please take a look at this book and order it. You can get it from Amazon. This is not, I'm not sponsored by this person or Amazon or anything. I just really believe in giving good information, and you guys, this is it. This is good information. So, and there's more updated versions of this book as well. So make sure you get the most updated version. I think this one uses a lot of gendered pronouns, but I think possibly the more updated version of this book talks about that and maybe doesn't use as much gendered language, though I can't promise that. That's just what I've heard. So anyways, I cannot recommend that book more. Please order it if you're wanting to learn more about this stuff, because this was life-changing for me. So please, please, please read that book. It was amazing. But for now, I think that that's all I have on this first sex ed video. I hope you guys learned a lot. I hope it was fun for you. And I will see you in the next video, which I can't wait because it's going to be fun. So please hit that bell icon so you know when the next video in this series comes out, and I will see you so soon. Bye!